Hi, it's me, Olivia. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel for interesting stories and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the description. Thanks. Unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever, this exposed assets that captured my attention 1,000 times more thoroughly than her enhanced breathing exercises had done the day before. They were so lovely, so shapely with smooth flowing curves that changed in complex yet always compatible ways. The, accents were spectacular, dark and mysterious and much larger than I expected. The ache hidden under the hot water became much more intense, much more demanding. If I had to put that infernal outfit on at this time, well, the kingdom would never see an heir from my bloodline. Still, I couldn't tear my eyes away. Or, at least I didn't think I could. Though I stayed soaking in the bath after Mother finished with my hair, when Julia was finished she was told to stand up and get dressed. That revealed a distraction that made even her other treasures seem, well, never uninteresting, perhaps challenged for attention. Julia seemed unaware of this and slipped on a thin robe while she began to run towels through the heavy mass of her fiery hair. I still stared. I knew I was doing so, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the slim goddess sitting in the morning sunlight, her damp robe caressing her so intimately. "Charisse," Mother said sharply, and I realized it was not the first time she had called. Yes, what? I babbled. "Stand up, you now need to dry yourself," she ordered. Not now, I muttered quietly, trying not to let Julia hear. "Yes, now," she said even more sharply. In the face of a direct order, I really had no option. I stood up, revealing a surprisingly slender waist of my own, and a bit of shape above due to the forced redistribution of what little excess flesh I owned. Still, the water was deep enough that the most strident disclaimer of my femininity was concealed. "All the way," Mother demanded, but gently. She was trying to get us both through this issue. I didn't think she knew, though, just how much of an issue had arisen. I would have been better off to have obeyed immediately as my extended reluctance had captured Julia's attention. When I finally stepped fully from the water, her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in concentration. I was too embarrassed to study her reaction more closely, turning and reaching for my own robe. "You'll both have to get used to this," Mother explained. "It is normal for noble companions protected by a maiden's lover to help each other in their needs. That is all that you're doing. Remember that." Julia's eyes now twitched in a grin she tried to keep off her lips. "It appears that will be easier for me than for, Charisse." "Actually not," Mother cautioned. "Charisse will not find it difficult to think of you as female. You will have to be careful not to let anything slip." "Charisse was so perfect that I had quite forgotten," Julia said, and I tried to decide if that was good news or bad. "As I hope all others in the castle will do without a constant reminder," replied the queen. By this time both of us had toweled our hair dry enough to stop active dripping, which was all that we needed before we dressed. Once we were again in our diabolical devices, the palace servants for hairdressing and cosmetics would attend us. Before Mother brought our lovers back, though, she handed each of us a sharp blade. She ordered us, remove all the body hair from each other. It is important to be as smooth as possible under the garments. Julia looked at me, a spark of humor in the green jewels of her eyes, then dropped her robe without comment. I should have done it first, for the sight of her once again nude and glowing resurrected my interest, and its undeniable sign. "Oh, you poor dear," Julia giggled. "It's not funny," I snapped. "Actually, it is," she disagreed, "but it's no more ladylike of me to recognize it than it is of you to show your interest." Her humor still shone forth with bright glory from her eyes, and it just would not be denied. Even Mother was struggling to contain a grin. I finally gave in and laughed with them. But I decided I could have a little fun of my own. "So, Julia, Mother says we need to help each other. Closer than sisters," I began. She nodded, still laughing, before she really absorbed what I had said. "Then perhaps you could give me a little help with my, need before we are again imprisoned," I grinned. Her eyes flashed with instant anger at the thought that I would suggest she would do such a thing. But before she used the blade she held to solve the problem permanently, she realized I was teasing and calmed down. Somewhat. I suppose I deserved that, she grumped. Mother nodded on my behalf, since I was treading lightly right at that moment. This will require you both to be tolerant and helpful, not make fun of each other. Now finish your duties. Julia had very little body hair, and the fine down that was all I had ever possessed grew slowly. As a result, it was only a few minutes with the blades and soothing oil before we were each as smooth as porcelain. If I had thought things through more carefully, I would have taken longer so that I might delay the next step. The only other thing that needed to be done before we went out to the waiting servants was to be locked again into our enforcers of maidenly virtue. The process was much the same as before. Actually, the days of constant embrace had narrowed my waist and the corset portion fit more easily. In the presence of Julia, though, the nether region was even more uncomfortable than before. At least when she saw the real distress the device caused me, Julia's eyes showed correspondingly real sympathy. I didn't think she'd make jokes about that problem again. Though we had been at our morning bath for over an hour, it was still only the first part of our daily preparations. The palace servants brought forth gowns of more durable cloth for us that day, though they were of course still black, still relatively simple in adornment. In another hour we were ready to go to breakfast. Leonidas was just finishing up as we made our entrance. He stood in welcome, and I was gratified to see that his eyes went first to me. "Are you feeling better this morning?" he asked me politely. "In some ways," I reported. "But not in all ways?" he asked. Queen Celie interceded. "She has rested well, but I think she needs to get some fresh air. It looks to be a beautiful day today, and it has been some time since the fields south of the castle have been inspected." Leonidas looked surprised. "Well, so was I. She conducts inspections for you?" he asked. "It is a royal duty, and she is all the royal family there is left besides myself," Queen Celie reminded the regent with a voice too flat to carry the emotion that showed in her eyes. To his credit, Leonidas looked embarrassed. To his further credit, he did not apologize for the war he thought they had won. "Then I shall accompany her," he declared. "It is appropriate for me to understand this land as well." The look of satisfaction in Mother's eyes was almost too subtle to see, but in the next instant her eyes found mine, and I knew I had not imagined it. Hugh of Sandars was summoned to prepare the royal outing. Since I was going, Julia would go. Our proper escort also required at least one member of the palace guard. Hugh went off to arrange for horses and provisions. Leonidas summoned his anonymous tan-garbed shadow and motioned that he should drop his hood. "This is Strain," he introduced the man. Strain was dark with more than hair coloring. He brooded under heavy brows, not happy at being revealed. "Strain, go find Alrin. The two of you will escort me. It is in my mind that you need to know about this new land as much as I do." Strain nodded without comment and left, followed shortly by the rest of us as we completed our simple breakfast. Hugh had arranged things with his usual efficiency, and it was only when I saw the Achaean guard who would accompany us that I saw a potential problem. It was Drayson, the one who had insulted me when it was unclear who would be executed as part of Cragdle's consolidation of power. Though he was under sentence of death along with the rest of us if my secret came out, still he had the greatest reason of all to hate me. The situation had to be resolved, and immediately. I expected some sort of confrontation as I walked directly to him where he waited. However, before I could speak, and though it was a breach of protocol, he blurted out, "Princess Charis, may I introduce my fiancée, Vina? I would do anything to keep her safe. And of course, my life is already committed to your safety." Well, that pretty well cleared up that issue. I had always disliked Drayson because he was exactly what father would have wanted in place of me: big, blunt-spoken, strong as an ox and about as intelligent. His betrothed, though, looked quite a bit smarter, and I suspected his little speech was the result of her understanding of the situation more than his. She was a pretty girl, though not in Julia's class in more ways than noble rank. Her brown hair was unbound per our new orders, but surprisingly short. I converted my intended confrontation into a greeting to his lady, and we mounted our horses. This was much worse than I expected. Riding side saddle at a gentle walk was no real problem. Riding while wearing that accursed maiden's lover was problem enough, though. No position I could take relieved the discomfort, compounded in my case in ways the designers of the device had never considered. It was some time before I could overcome the distraction. Leonidas noted my distress, though he misinterpreted the cause. The lands we rode through were close enough to the castle to have been plundered by the High Canyon horde, and this was more than adequate explanation for concern. Leonidas tried to open a conversation with an offer to participate in the rehabilitation of the land. We'll have to bring in some seed and a few sheep for these people. It will take more than that, I observed. This village has no blacksmith now, nor a potter. How can you tell? He asked in surprise. Even Julia's eyes showed she hadn't picked up on the telltale signs. The hearth in the forge is cold, though there is coal nearby. No active blacksmith would allow that. The same is true of the potter's kiln, though of course he uses wood, not coal. They have had enough time to return to their homes if they were able. Without them, this village will die. There is no mill here to give the site inherent value, nor mill pond or stream. Without local craftsmen, there is no market for a farmer's products, and so they will be taken elsewhere. It had been obvious to me, though I had never been in the hamlet before. Only after I explained did I remember that I had learned of this interaction in one of the books I had ordered. I expected that our chamberlain already knew of this problem, but not many others in our kingdom would recognize the signs. That is very, insightful, Leonidas mused. For once even Julia seemed to be impressed. At least, she made no immediate move to regain Leonidas' attention. Do all the women of Achaia possess such insight? He asked. Perhaps not, I answered. While my brothers were learning swordplay, I was studying other things. For once, I actually answered a question with absolute honesty. I'd have to remember this occasion. Until you came, I explained further, though the explanation returned to the problems High Canyon had caused us. We had no need for people to gather together for defense. As you can see, this hamlet had no barrier wall. Our villages arise from economic causes. The farmers are efficient at providing food, allowing specialized craftsmen to thrive as well. It is our way. By this time, we were leaving the village. Since the High Canyon horde had approached from the north, the land on this side of the castle returned to prosperity in a few miles. The villages showed the truth of the signs I had recognized, with the forge and kiln, if present at all, always heated. One town we passed also had a mill near a bridge over a stream. Drayson, I summoned the palace guard. What is this place? Not surprisingly, it is called Miller's Crossing. We have several villages with that name. Your father, the king, referred to this one as the one with the wide wheel. I saw that the mill wheel was indeed strangely proportioned. The land did not support a very high mill pond, and to make up the required force, the wheel had been made unusually wide. I see evidence of 2 blacksmiths here, though only one forge. See if there is someone who could move to the other village we passed. While he went off to obtain the information I requested, Leonidas looked carefully at the blacksmith's shop for the clues I had recognized, then shook his head. I confess, my princess, that I cannot see how you determined that. I looked at Julia with a small smile of invitation, but she shook her head as well. She might have the flirtation thing down better than I, but it could be that I would keep Leonidas interested after all. There are 2 anvils, of course, set up and ready for use. A single blacksmith would only need one. If he had a spare, he would keep it out of the way in that small shop. While we waited for Drayson, I rode over to his fiancée. When I reached her side of our group, I saw that she was not alone. Another tan cloak was perched atop a horse quite near hers. Your Highness, Evina said quickly as I approached. The tan cloak moved back a bit. Who is your conversationalist? I asked. This is one of the men from High Canyon, she offered. Really? I grinned. I never would have guessed. Good day, Alrin, I said to the man, making a guess despite my words. He started at my naming him, then pulled back the hood of his cloak. Princess, he said. Only intense study under Cragdle could have put that much sneer into so little inflection. It angered me. We might have to submit to Cragdle, but even Leonidas treated me, that is, us, respectfully. This hitherto faceless minion of High Canyon was not of our nobility, and I would not submit to him until he demonstrated the same power as his king. I felt the white cold mind boil up within me and let my eyes lock onto his. In the future, I will thank you to remember that these were our lands for generations before you came. The wealth and peace you covet are the result of my family's management. Do you think you can remember that? His eyes stared unmoving until I finally let my own gaze relax. This caused another small start in his taut body, followed by much more genteel words. Yes, Your Highness, I will remember. I'm not going to ask how you knew it was Alrin. I know the explanation will be obvious as soon as you say it, Leonidas said with a smile. He had ridden up as I was speaking. Though he hadn't really seen the depth of intensity in my will, he had felt the tension between us and was trying to defuse it. I nodded my head in acceptance of his decision, a grin of my own feeling strange after so much controlled fury. Then I caught Julia's eyes with a challenging grin for her as well and took as deep a breath as my tormenting guardian would allow. Her eyes widened in shock first, then in humor of her own. Leonidas didn't notice her expression, of course. His eyes were riveted to the swell that graced the front of my dress. Julia's gown was no more revealing than mine this day, and Mother had apparently had a bit better figure when her maiden's lover was tailored than Julia did. Of course, that made my own life even more difficult, but it did give me an advantage at the moment. Julia's responding grin was wide enough to show her real pleasure in the challenge. She moved her hand to flip at her hair, but I beat her to that gesture as well, flicking my blonde tresses to capture the morning sun. My motion caught Leonidas' eye and redirected his focus, though still not toward Julia. Behind his back, she gave me a jaunty salute, then a grin that promised further battle. Now, though, we were on the same side and we both knew it. Drayson returned before anything else could happen, confirming my suspicion on the number of blacksmiths. Better yet, one was a senior apprentice essentially ready to move out on his own. It solved a couple of problems at once to help him relocate to the village nearer the castle. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Thanks.